Ho ho, baby. 1-800-449-8255. And you just stumbled upon the most amazing talk radio show on the internet worldwide. The only show you need from the only MC, DJ, whatever you want to call me, the itchy kitchy Clark the Shark Show at 1-800-449-8255. You got it. It's Clark the Shark, the Wolfman Jack on crack. And if you're a young person who wants to learn about progressive rock, Genesis, ELP, Yes, Jethro Tull, bands like that, well, you've come to the only guy you need, Clark the Shark. Because today I'm going to break down an amazing album by one of the most amazing progressive rock musical bands of the 1970s and beyond. And of course, I'm talking about Genesis. Tony Banks, Peter Gabriel, Stephen Hackett, Phil Collins, and of course the amazing bass player Mike Rutherford. And this album, FOXTROT, 1972. This album came out after Nursery Crime, 1971. And of course, Nursery Crime is one of my favorite Genesis albums. Oh, it's amazing. But FOXTROT, oh, if you're a young person right now, age 11 to 21, right now in 2023, and you're curious about real progressive rock, I'm not talking about Dragon Force or Dream Theater. I'm not, those bands are really good musicians. But when you want to go progressive rock, you got to go back to the 1970s. I mean, you got to go back to the source. And the amazing bands, beginning about 1968 to 1973, 74, 75, 76. Genesis stayed a really good band for as long as they could. And then there were three is a really interesting album. And they didn't even have Steve Hackett. And then, of course, Duke. Man, it's just Phil Collins and Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. And it's still really good. They got some pop songs creeping in. And Phil Collins is slowly going solo. And, Phil just puts out all this garbage in the 80s. But he becomes a really big star, playing Live Aid. And he just becomes real hip in the music industry. In the 1980s, Phil Collins is kind of like the Dave Grohl of the 80s. He came out from behind the drum set to be a singer. I mean, he never played guitar, but, you think he played piano and drums. Phil Collins, but his music is fucking crap. And then he actually made Genesis slowly turn into a fucking crappy band. I mean, there's the occasional still good songs, I like the Brazilian and some of, every now and then, Chester Thompson. It's weird. I like Genesis mainly for the guys who aren't in the band. Chester Thompson and Daryl Stuermer on guitar. A great sandwich. Who's on guitar? Daryl Stuermer. Oh, great sandwich. You remember the video with Phil where Phil's funny, man. He's got the deadpan humor, and he's a funny looking guy. It's all well and good, but I love Genesis for the music they made in the early 1970s. Of course, I love From Genesis to Revelation. Their first album. It's awesome. It's like the Bee Gees. It almost sounds like Barry Gibb. I love it, man. But, and I love The Knife. I love Trespass. But I love Nursery Crime, 1971. But I'm going to talk about an amazing album here. Genesis Foxtrot, 1972. And it's got this foxy lady. Look at her. She's out on the ice, and the dogs are chasing her. Foxtrot, they're chasing the fox, don't we all? Look at her in a red dress. It's a fox. You know, but this cover here isn't quite showing it, but the dogs, they're all on the shore. They don't quite catch the lady. At 1-800-449-8255, the Itchy Kitchy Clark the Shark Show, the Wolfman Jack on crack from the golden EIB Sharkraphone. It's not a microphone, people. It's a Sharkraphone. It's even better because my reviews of rock and roll are a cut above those other YouTube guys. They didn't live it. You know, a lot of those guys are tall, they're good looking, they're clean. People like those guys. Nobody likes Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255. I'm 5'6". I'm just like a drunk man. I tell no tales. I tell you the truth, and you get the word, the testimony from Clark the Shark. And when I'm talking about 1972, when I was 7 years old, and my brother Paul and my brother Greg and people in my neighborhood, there was a kid down the street, just a couple doors down, named Brian Miner. And they all loved Genesis Foxtrot with Peter Gabriel. We love Roxy Music. Yeah, we love David Bowie. Come on, you know we did, man. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. But I'm talking about this amazing album. Progressive rock, man. But Peter Gabriel puts a twist on this progressive rock band that Yes doesn't have, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer doesn't have, and Jethro Tull doesn't have, and the Who Quadrophenia don't have, but Quadrophenia's got everything, baby. But Genesis are like, hey mate, Foxtrot with this girl. Look at her, she's a fox. At 1-800-449-8255, and they're like, Clark the Shark, we got something the Who don't got. Fuck, man, we got shit the Beatles don't got at Genesis. 1-800-449-8255. The Clark the Shark Show, the only rock and roll show you'll ever need is Clark the Shark, because I lived these albums. I grew up with this album, playing this music in the 1980s when I was just a kid, man. I know Genesis like no one else, man. I know all the albums. I even know the shitty albums with Phil Collins, if you want the truth, baby. I know Genesis because I'm always curious about Tony Banks. I'm always inquisitive and curious about Steve Hackett and Mike Rutherford, these amazing musicians. And in 1972, man, this album with the fox, and the dogs are on the shore, but you can't see them, but they're chasing this fox. We're all chasing her, man. The fox in the red dress. And look at her. And there's always something like a lady on a bicycle shoes or a whale or a submarine. There's always something in the background on Genesis. What is that on the shore? There's always something in the background that the artist, just like Nursery Crime, he's got to have this thing, like a submarine or like a whale or something jumping out of the sea. But I'm mainly looking at the fox on the ice. And the dogs couldn't catch her at 1-800-449-8255. And this guy is the most amazing lead singer, Peter Gabriel, man. We recorded it at Oxford. Bleeding Oxford. I don't even know what that is. They always just show some building on Wikipedia. What the fuck does Oxford have to do with Genesis? Oh yeah, baby. 5 stars. I don't know who he gave it a 3. Probably Rolling Stone. Oh, of course. Look at Rolling Stone giving Genesis a 3. at 1-800-449-8255. Don't listen to Rolling Stone. You listen to Clark the Shark from the Golden EIB Sharkerphone. And I'm going to tell you, this is a 5-star album by Genesis. You know why, baby? Because Watcher of the skies, doodly-doo. Do you judge God by his creatures when they are dead? Ah, Watcher of the skies. And timetable. Oh man, an oak table carved when being a man meant more than Stonehenge or anything. It meant more than life. Timetable, a carved oak table, cookie crust. A time when honor meant more than to a man than life. You're just getting these Victorian tunes from Genesis and Peter Gabriel. And sometimes Tony Banks writes the lyrics. You think Peter Gabriel does everything. And then he quit the band in 1974, 75. And then you realized he did nothing. Peter's like, the people thought I did everything. And then it's like, well, he did nothing. Oh, Peter, you're so wrong. You did do everything in Genesis. To me, Clark the Shark, Peter Gabriel is Genesis. And they're just his backing band. At 1-800-449-8255 and get him out by Friday. Amazing song. Gabriel wrote the lyrics to that one. But I always think like trash. Like get the trash out by Friday. Get it out by bloody Friday. I don't even know if it's about trash. But I love that song. And I love this album, Foxtrot by Genesis. 1-800-449-8255, The Clark the Shark Show. And Can Utility and the Coastliners. That sounds like Arthur Lee and Love. That's a title like she could be off Forever Changes with Arthur Lee. And of course it's by Hackett. Steve Hackett. He's amazing. Tony Banks is amazing. There's long songs here, man. Watcher of the Skies is 723. But Can Utility and the Coastliners is like, that's Arthur Lee. That's a title, like between Hillsdale and Clark. And like, what is that, man? That's Hackett, the amazing guitar player. And then the little instrumental, Horizons, is, a little tidbit where they're like, we're getting you ready for the most amazing Genesis song. And of course that song is Supper's Ready, with all these little stories and parts. It's like The Who, a quick one. Oh, but it's so much better. Supper's Ready. I'm thinking of a girl named Summer. Keep it clean, Clark the Shark. Keep it clean. It's a family show. 1-800-449. Don't start thinking of a gal named Summer. Don't think of her, Clark the Shark. Just think of Supper's Ready by Genesis. 1-800-449-8255. With all these little intricate parts, all these little miniature ideas in this rock opera. And Supper's Ready is 23 minutes. It's a 23-minute song by the most amazing progressive rock band Genesis with Peter Gabriel and Tony Banks. And to me, this will always be like Peter Gabriel solo, and Genesis is his backing band. But it ain't true. This is a democracy. And no, Peter Gabriel doesn't do everything. He does nothing in Genesis, this democracy with Tony Banks. He's just hogging all the instrumentation. And Steve Hackett, with his amazing guitar, he's just trying to keep up or just get... He just wants to be involved and write songs. And he's like, look, you guys, I got all these bloody songs, and if you don't let me play, I'm going to quit the band in 1978. And that's what he did after Wind and Wuthering. And Tony's like, well, we just mixed him out of the album. And that was it, really. No, it's Genesis with Peter Gabriel, 1972, with just the most amazing album, Foxtrot. I love this album. I want all of you to go buy this album right now. I want you guys to support Genesis, the early Genesis. Phil Collins is really sick right now, guys. Support him. Help Phil. And he toured, man. Phil kept trying to play gigs. Sitting in a wheelchair on stage. You gotta love that, man. I'm not the world's biggest Phil Collins fan, but I appreciate and I love that. I love Phil for doing that. I think his music sucks, and I think Genesis sucks with Phil Collins, but I still kind of respect it and I kind of like it because Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford are still in it at 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show, coming to you from the golden EIB Sharkraphone on March 1st, 2023 from Los Angeles. And Peter Gabriel's like, thank you, Shark, for reminding everybody I was the singer of Genesis. And I'm like, Pete, you're the only singer for me. For me, Clark the Shark, you're the only singer Genesis will ever have. But I still love Phil. It's fun to make fun of Phil. Phil's funny looking. He's just such a weirdo. But I still love Phil in a way, man. And I still respect the latter Latin Genesis. Because I love Tony Banks on keyboards. He's always interesting. And Mike Rutherford and Daryl Sturmer, he's better than a sandwich at 1-800-449-8255. And I love Chester Thompson on drums. I love it when him and Phil are doing a drum battle. It's so great at 1-800-449-8255. But I love Foxtrot Genesis 1972 when Clark the Shark was just 7 years old at Parkway School in Torrance. And I'd come home and me brothers would be listening to Genesis, Foxtrot, Selling England by the Pound, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is so amazing. Oh, it's one of the most amazing albums. I have to review it. I'm so bummed out that Peter Gabriel quit Genesis. I was only like 10, 11 years old, but I remember it. Man, I remember right where I was when someone said, hey, Clark, Peter Gabriel just quit Genesis. I was just a little kid, man. I was like 10, 11. I was like 1975. I'm like, what? Peter Gabriel quit Genesis? I'm like, there's no way they can bloody go on. But then, of course, we all know they did A Trick of the Tail, 1976. It's an album that sounds just like Peter Gabriel is singing. And Peter's like, what do you know? All the people are going to be like, he did nothing. And I'm like, that's not true, Peter. Genesis was always a democracy. But to me, you did everything. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. Peter Gabriel, with just all his costumes and foxes' heads, like this fox. Peter Gabriel did everything in Genesis. And those other four guys were just his bleeding backing band. And Peter's like, no, come on, Clark. I did nothing. At 1-800-449-8255, and I'm like, no way, Peter Gabriel. You did everything. And it's on the Clark the Shark Show today, March 1, 2023. And if you're a young person, 10, 11, 12, because that's where it begins. If you want to learn about great progressive rock, I want you to go on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, and I want you to support Genesis and buy Foxtrot. I want you to buy this album right now and learn about all the Genesis albums with Peter Gabriel. This is Clark the Shark, the Wolfman Jack on crack. I'm telling you, man, I'm the only reviewer you need on YouTube. I'm the only talk radio guy you need. Forget Hannity, forget Hush Bimbo reruns, forget Michael Savage. I mean, those guys are interesting, man, but they didn't live it. Like Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255, a talk radio show where I'm telling you about Foxtrot 1972. Peter Gabriel and Genesis, man, this is amazing music. And you have to listen to this. If you're a young person, I don't care if you're born in 2002, you're born after 9/11 in 2001, you're going to grow up listening to Billie Eilish. Fuck that. Don't listen to Billie Eilish. And don't listen to Dave Grohl. And don't listen to Green Day, man. Fuck all that shit. You listen to Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255. The Clark the Shark Show. That's right. The Wolfman Jack on crack. And I'm coming to you live from the golden EIB Sharkraphone. Because when you're listening to oldies, you're listening to Clark the Shark, the man with the golden voice at 94.9 oldies. I don't even have a golden voice. I'm not even that talented. I'm not even that skilled. I'm just a regular guy that's 5'6" at 1-800-449-8255, and I'm telling you people, get into progressive rock, ELP, Genesis, yes, The Who Quadrophenia, Jethro Tull, Eloy. There's so many more bands, man. Get into the Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. I mean, listen to punk rock. Listen to Lou Reed. But that stuff's not as important as Peter Gabriel. Listen to David Bowie. David Bowie's awesome. He's great. But Peter Gabriel has something. And Brian Ferry and Roxy Music, oh man, they have something David Bowie doesn't have. They got something Phil Collins and Pete Townsend don't have. Genesis FOXTROT, 1972. Peter Gabriel, he's a genius. But Tony Banks is a genius. And Mike Rutherford plays fretless bass. Sometimes, man, when Mike Rutherford is playing fretless on those later albums, it's amazing, man. On like Duke, he's playing fretless bass. And they're all amazing. Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks. And I'm so bummed out. When Steve Hackett quit Genesis, I knew right where I was, man. Because I'm like, Steve Hackett, how could you quit Genesis? And it's sad because Genesis sucked after Steve Hackett quit. They used that as an excuse to go pop and go commercial. I mean, as great as And Then There Were Three is in 1978, it lacks those things, man, those elements that earlier Genesis have. I mean, there's things missing. When Steve Hackett quits this band, it's actually worse or equal to when Peter Gabriel quit. I mean, imagine if Barry Gibb had quit the Bee Gees. That tosser, Barry Gibb, would never quit the Bee Gees. And you, Peter Gabriel, how could you quit Genesis? And Steve Hackett, how could you quit Genesis, man? And leave it a three-piece where Phil Collins is just writing this shitty pop at 1-800-449-8255, The Clark the Shark Show. I don't like Phil Collins, man. He's funny and he's cute. He's a weirdo, man. He's like the bloke next door. But Peter Gabriel's like this time traveler. Mysterious. Almost like a homeless hobo or something. He's just this mystical poet. And then you find out later, Peter Gabriel didn't even write all the lyrics that he's delivering. It's actually Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford. Peter Gabriel writes some of them. But you guys got to listen to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, because on that album, Peter Gabriel does everything. And he's like, no, Clark the Shark, I did nothing. And I'm like, no way, Peter Gabriel. Genesis was a democracy. It was by committee. Everybody in Genesis did everything, including you, Peter Gabriel. At 1-800-449-8255, The Clark the Shark Show. Nursery Crime is my favorite Genesis album, but Foxtrot in many ways. Watcher of the Skies and Supper's Ready. It's like, this is my favorite Genesis album also. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Selling England by the Pound is amazing in 1973. And The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is just so ahead of its time, man. 1974, but it sounds like 1976. Peter Gabriel, the mystical poet genius, he just takes over on that album. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, man. But we're talking about Foxtrot, 1972, with this fox. Ah, look at her. We all want to catch the fox. Look at her. Lucky for me, Clark the Shark, I caught me a fox or two in me day. Oh, yeah. Let's keep it clean, Clark the Shark. At 1-800-449-8255. And if you're a little guy like Clark the Shark, you're only 5'6", and your family hates you, your dad ignores you, you still catch this fox. I caught me one. Matter of fact, I caught many in me day. I'm only 5'6", and girls are like, oh, he's so cuddly. Clark the Shark is so cute and cuddly. He's just 5'6". At 1-800-449-8255. Come on, guys. You can get a fox like her. Don't be one of the dogs on the shore. Look at the dogs. Oh, where are they? The dogs are on the shore, and they can't catch up with the fox. Well, lucky for me, Clark the Shark, I'm married, and I caught up with a fox. I caught up with a fox right there at 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. You can do it too, man. Don't kill yourself, man. Don't go listen to Lou Reed like I did. You just feel depressed from listening to that guy, or Iggy Pop. I fucking love Iggy Pop and I love Lou Reed, but I love Peter Gabriel more because he's a mystical poet, and he probably caught himself a fox like her at 1-800-449-8255. Foxtrot, 1972, the Clark the Shark Show. I want you to buy this album, man, and I want you to support this amazing progressive rock. I don't even really call this progressive. To me, this is just great music. To me, Genesis are just like the Beatles. Oi! Clark the Shark is Paul McCartney. What are you doing talking about a fox? Oh, you bloody... I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue the Rattles. I'll sue Neil Innes. Don't be making excuses for yourself, Clark the Shark is Paul. I'll tell you right now, I'll fucking sue you if you mention me name on your stupid videos. I'm like, Paul, but I like this fox. I love her. We all love the fox at 1-800-449-8255 on Genesis. Foxtrot, 1972. This album is so amazing. I love it. And Paul's like, you can get it together, Clark. I'll sue the Rattles. I'll sue the Bee Gees. I have to. I think the Bee Gees ripped off the Beatles. And John got shot. He got popped off by some loony, and Yoko won't talk to me. I'll fucking sue you. I'll sue this bleeding fox. I'll sue the Rattles and Neil Innes and George Harrison. I'll sue everybody who steals from the Beatles. And I'm like, Paul, you hang out with Dave Grohl. That guy's a fucking douchebag. And then he turned you into a bleeding douchebag at 1-800-449-8255. But I'm like, yeah, Clark the Shark is right. Listen to this bleeding album. So amazing. Genesis Foxtrot, 1972. And I'm like, you tell him, Paul. Genesis Foxtrot, I want you to buy this album at iTunes, Amazon, everywhere. Support Peter Gabriel and all these great guys. Tony Banks. Steve Hackett is so amazing on guitar. And I want you to buy Steve Hackett's solo albums. All